Hey guys, Fletch Football Observer here, and today's video is going to be a Premier League review show reviewing Game 16 of the 2019-2020 season. There were a lot of goals, some absolutely quality goals at that in this round of fixtures, and there may have also been the odd shock or two. And of course, for all of the game's results, all of the game's major talking points, this is where I sum everything up. So without further ado, let's begin. We begin with arguably the biggest game of this round of fixtures, and it was of course the Manchester derby, in which the red half of Manchester prevailed after Manchester United beat Manchester City 2-1 at the Etihad Stadium. United broke the deadlock midway through the first half when Marcus Rashford scored from the penalty spot after he was initially brought down by Bernardo Silva after VAR intervened. The penalty was given. And from there, things got even better for United, as minutes later, they doubled their lead for Anthony Martial, who drilled a shot that clipped the inside of the post and went in. City did manage to halve the deficit very late on in the game through Nicolas Otamendi, who headed home from a City corner. However, it was too little too late by then, and for Pep Guardiola's side, that means that they lost. United take the victory, and of course, the bragging rights along with the 3 points. Big win for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side and Manchester United. The issue here though for United is, whilst it's all well and good beating both Tottenham and Manchester City in the same week, do you really think that this kind of form will continue, especially when next week they face against Everton? United are the kind of side that will pick up a couple of very good results and fall away against a more favourable game, shall we say. I honestly don't know because of how inconsistent both them and Everton are at this point. But that's something for me to think about in my preview for sure. But for now, they can enjoy this huge win. But as for City, big problems for them. They have big problems. They are now 14 points behind Liverpool. That's 14 points that separate them from top of the table, Liverpool. And that is a huge gap. Not only that, but you can honestly see more teams fancying their chances against this side going forward. Especially those who are very good on the counter-attack. United absolutely destroyed them on the counter-attack on multiple occasions. And if their finishing was better, United probably would have scored more goals in this game. But for City, of course, they have Champions League commitments now, and then they'll look to bounce back in the league when they take on Arsenal next Sunday. Next, we saw Leicester maintain their 8-point gap behind league leaders Liverpool following a 4-1 victory over Aston Villa at Villa Park. Leicester drew first blood with 28 minutes on the clock when Kelechi Iheanacho played through Jamie Vardy, and he rounded the goalkeeper to set Leicester on their way. Iheanacho then turned from provider to goal scorer as James Maddison's drilled cross was bundled home by the striker before Villa managed to get a goal back on the stroke of half time through Jack Grealish's strike. However, Johnny Evans restored the Foxes' 2-goal cushion, heading home Maddison's cross shortly after half time. And then, to round off the afternoon, Vardy raced through on goal and drilled his shot into the corner to score his 16th goal of the season, as Leicester made it 8 consecutive wins. A great win for Leicester in what was being built up as a possibly tricky game for them, and whilst Villa did pose a few tough questions of them at times, for the Foxes defensively, Leicester are so good and now go 6 points ahead of Manchester City and maintain an 8-point gap behind Liverpool. The Foxes will now look ahead to their next fixture, which is against Norwich next Saturday. But as for Villa, not clinical enough or lethal enough in front of goal, and it sort of cost them here, along with a few defensive errors along the way. That definitely didn't help, and they'll be hoping for better fortune in their next game, which is away at Sheffield United. Our next game saw Everton begin life without Marco Silva in winning fashion by beating Chelsea 3-1 at Goodison Park. The news broke of Silva's sacking on Thursday night, and it was revealed that Everton legend Duncan Ferguson will be taking over as interim manager. And within the opening 6 minutes of the game, he got off to a dream start. The Toffees broke the deadlock through Richarlison, who headed home, dribbled Sidibe's cross, and it got even better for the home side shortly after the restart, when Dominic Calvert-Lewin doubled their lead with a well-taken goal from inside the penalty area. Mere minutes later though, Chelsea managed to halve the deficit when Mateo Kovacic's strike from distance found its way into the back of the net. From there, it was a game that was certainly on. That was until Everton put the game to bed very late on, when the ball kindly fell to Calvert-Lewin inside the penalty area, and he managed to poke the ball home to score his second of the afternoon, Everton's third, and in the process seal a much deserved win for the struggling Toffees side. Clearly a great win for the Toffees here, who I must apologise to for seeming a little bit arrogant towards their chances in this game, as in the preview I did claim that this wasn't going to end in anything more than a Chelsea win or maybe a draw at best. How wrong was I? Regardless, a good win here, and nice for an Everton legend in Duncan Ferguson to be in charge of the victory and make a slight claim for the job himself. Should he be serious about it, of course, we wait and see on that score. And obviously Everton take on Manchester United next Sunday. Will he be in charge for that game? Only time will tell. As for the Blues though, it was a bad day at the office for them. Maybe Lampard had one eye on their big Champions League game coming up against Lille midweek, so maybe that played a factor. Either way though, they'll want to move on from this game and they'll want to turn their attention to that Champions League game, and of course beyond that to their next Premier League game, and hope to get back to winning ways when they take on. Our next game saw an Arsenal fight back to claim victory over West Ham at the London Stadium in a Monday night's fixture. A win that is the first for Freddie Ljungberg's reign as temporary manager of the Gunners. The game had to wait 38 minutes before the deadlock was broken when Angelo Ogbonna put the hosts in front with a deflected header. The Gunners managed to respond 3 times in 9 minutes in the second half to equalise, go in front and then put the game to bed. First, Gabriel Martinelli on the hour mark found the bottom corner from inside the penalty area. Then Nicolas Pepe put Arsenal in front with a superb left-footed strike after cutting in from the right wing. And then to put the game beyond all doubt and put the game beyond West Ham's reach, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang scored the third goal after being perfectly set up by goal scorer turned provider Pepe, as Arsenal ended a run of 9 games without a win. Big win for Arsenal this one, a much needed one at that, given that their last victory in the league came at the beginning of October. And of course, a great moment for Freddie Ljungberg, who finally can put on record his first Arsenal victory as manager. Arsenal have Europa League commitments this week before seeing if they can make it back-to-back wins, although it'll be a tough ask of doing so as they take on Manchester City on Sunday. As for West Ham, more pressure added on to Manuel Pellegrini. I said last week that the victory the Hammers got over Chelsea may have made him stay on a little bit longer at the club, and this very well could be the final game that he's in charge of for the Hammers following this defeat. Only time will tell on that score though. West Ham now turn their attention to their next league game, which is against Southampton in Saturday's evening kickoff, which I think needless to say is a huge game for both sides. Next up, Liverpool maintain their unbeaten season and their 8-point gap at the top of the table following a 3-0 victory over Bournemouth on Saturday. The breakthrough eventually came 10 minutes before half time. Jordan Henderson's long ball released Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and his first time shot found its way into the back of the net. On the stroke of half time, Liverpool doubled their lead when a great team move was rounded off with a 1-2 between Naby Keita and Mohamed Salah, and Salah's back heel released Keita, who fired home. The Reds rounded off the performance by adding a third goal through Salah himself when Keita turned from goal scorer to provider, slipping the Egyptian winger through on goal, and he steered the ball into the back of the net as Liverpool held on for the comfortable victory and managed to finally secure a clean sheet to boot. A comfortable victory for Liverpool in the end, and to make it even slightly sweeter for them, Manchester City also lose further ground on them with their loss to Manchester United later in that day, and now it appears that Leicester may be their only realistic rivals to the Premier League title right now. A clean sheet only makes the victory even sweeter for the Reds, and also a great display of squad depth from the Reds for the past couple of games, especially ahead of what is a busy few weeks for them, which begins with a crucial Champions League game on Tuesday night before taking on Watford on Saturday. As for Bournemouth and the Cherries though, their 5th loss on the bounce now. Granted, not many people gave them a chance in this game of getting anything, but not much of a fight was put up either. and in all honesty, they need to find a way to turn this form around very soon. But their next game is another tricky encounter as they travel away to face Chelsea. Our next game saw a goalless draw play out between Watford and Crystal Palace at Vicarage Road. One of the many spectators in the ground for this game was one Nigel Pearson, the man who on Friday night was appointed as the new Watford manager, and he watched on as his new team being taken over by interim manager Hayden Mullins for this one game, stopped a run of 3 consecutive defeats to take a point against Palace. It was a game in which both sides created a handful of half chances but nothing clear cut, as both sides were forced to share the spoils in what was clearly not a highlight of a pretty decent Premier League weekend all round. Watford begin life with a new manager, and that's the only thing I can really say about this, because this game wasn't much to write home about. Whether Nigel Pearson is the right choice of manager or not remains to be seen though. He will take over his first Hornets game, and what a game to do it, next Saturday when they take on Premier League leaders Liverpool in the lunchtime kickoff. As for Palace, 3 games unbeaten now and not the best performances here, but they'll just want to move on from this game to their next one, which is against Brighton next Monday night. Next, we saw Newcastle come from behind to beat Southampton 2-1 at St James's Park following a late Federico Fernandez goal. Southampton had the better of the first half chances but didn't make their pressure pay until after half time, when they went ahead and eventually drew first blood through Danny Ings latching onto a Jack Stevens long ball and firing home beyond Martin Dubravka in the Magpies' goal. From there though, Newcastle responded and eventually equalised through John Joe Shelby with his 3rd goal in 3 games after he headed home Andy Carroll's cross. The game seemed to be heading for a draw, right up until Sean Longstaff's long-range drive was spilled by Alex McCarthy in the Saints' goal, and Fernandez was on hand to convert the rebound from close range as the Magpies held on to all 3 points. A big win for Newcastle this one, and once again Steve Bruce's side manages to basically guide his team to another victory and take them up to 10th. And I think it's safe to say they're having a better season than what many people would have predicted at the beginning, including myself of course. And now, in order to keep that run of form going, Newcastle will turn their attention to facing Burnley next Saturday. As for Southampton though, defensive errors again costing them, and their 3-game unbeaten streak comes to an end. Missed opportunities didn't help either, but at least Danny Ings is in good scoring form right now for the Saints, scoring in his 5th consecutive game here. Southampton will look to bounce back next week when they take on West Ham next Saturday evening at St Mary's. A quick fire comeback by Sheffield United is the subject for our next game, as the Blades got back to winning ways following a 2-1 victory over Norwich at Carrow Road. Norwich took the lead shortly before the half-hour mark when the Blades failed to deal with a Canaries corner and the ball fell kindly for Alex Tete, who fired home. United fought back though in the second half and scored twice in a matter of minutes to both equalise and then go in front. First, George Baldock teed up Enda Stevens to head home, and then shortly afterwards Baldock turned from provider to goal scorer as he worked some space for himself before hitting a strike that was too hot for Tim Krul in the Norwich goal to handle. There was then some VAR interference later on when Chris Basham's poor challenge on Kenny McLean was originally given as a red card to the United player. However, VAR looked at it and overturned referee Simon Hooper's decision, and Basham was allowed to return to the action with the downgraded yellow card to his name instead, as the Blades held on for the victory and all 3 points. A great win for Sheffield United. They needed a response from their defeat last time out to Newcastle, and they certainly got one here. The Blades are in 8th right now, but it is so tight in and around them Europa League spots, with only a matter of 1 or 2 points separating multiple teams. United will now turn their attention to facing Aston Villa on Saturday. Whilst Norwich will want to move on from this fixture, and they really do need to start picking up more points, but they have another tricky fixture on the horizon when they face an away trip to Leicester, in form Leicester I should say, in their next game. Our next game saw Tottenham run riot against Burnley at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium following a 5-0 thumping on Saturday afternoon. Spurs broke the deadlock within the opening 5 minutes through a stunning strike from distance by Harry Kane. 5 minutes later, Tottenham doubled their lead after a bit of a pinball situation inside the 6-yard box ended with the ball falling kindly for Lucas Moura to prod home. Then the third goal for Spurs was simply sublime. Heung-min Son picked the ball up from the edge of his own penalty area and ran and kept running and kept running and kept running, beating a number of Burnley players until he came one-on-one with Nick Pope in the Burnley goal, and the South Korean winger's cool finish produced a contender for goal of the season. In the second half, Kane scored his second of the afternoon, firing home from just inside the penalty area, and then to round off the performance, when Moussa Sissoko added the home side's fifth goal of the afternoon in what was a day to forget for those associated with Burnley Football Club. A simply stunning performance from Tottenham, and it needed to be. There needed to be a reaction following their defeat to Manchester United earlier this week, and the supporters definitely received that. Son and Kane arguably scored contenders for goals of the season as well, and a clean sheet to boot for Spurs, and it was all round a great afternoon for Jose Mourinho and Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. They have Champions League commitments this week. It's pretty much a dead game. There's nothing really much riding on it before facing Wolves away next weekend, whilst Burnley, who want to put this result behind them, move on from this and will want to move on after getting torn apart by Spurs here, and they will look to do that when they go against Newcastle on Saturday. And finally, we come to the last game, which saw Brighton and Wolves play out a 2-2 draw at the Amex Stadium. The main point of the action all came in the first half, and 3 of the goals came within 8 minutes of each other, with first Wolves drawing first blood shortly before the half-hour mark when Diego Jota was on hand to fire home Raul Jimenez's through ball following a swift Wolves breakaway. Mere minutes later though, Brighton equalised through Neil Maupay, whose strike beat Rui Patricio in the Wolves goal after latching onto a Dale Stephens long ball. A couple of minutes later, Brighton turned the game completely on its head by going in front. Leandro Trossard's cross was headed home by Davy Proper as the Seagulls went ahead. However, on the stroke of half-time, it was Wolves' turn to equalise. Jota got his second goal of the game and got Wolves back on level terms after the away side capitalised on a defensive error by the Seagulls, and it was a goal that proved to be the factor that meant both sides came away with a point apiece. And for Wolves, it extended their unbeaten run to 11 consecutive games. A game that was there for the taking in the second half for either side, but neither side could really take the game by the scruff of its neck to the other. And so a draw was arguably the correct result on reflection. Wolves extend their unbeaten run whilst Brighton pick up another decent point, although a couple of defensive errors would be a little frustrating for them. Both sides will look to get back to winning ways in their next game, with Wolves having Europa League football midweek before entertaining Tottenham on Sunday, whilst Brighton take on Crystal Palace next Monday night. And that wraps up this Premier League review show for Game 16 of the Premier League season 2019-2020. Guys, if you have any thoughts or comments or predictions on any of this round's big talking points or any of this round's results, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things would be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch, the Football Observer. This has been another Premier League review show, and I will see and speak with you all again soon in another video.